Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. In this episode, Eoin, Fitzgerald, and I take a quick look at the triumvirate of bank failures in the US with Silvergate, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank, before Eoin asks me about my lessons learned from seeing over 1,000 deals in the last year and a bit through Techstars. So we riff on easy-to-remember mental models, investing in lines, not dots, building relationships with founders, how those relationships evolve post-investment, and the founder having the most credible voice in the room. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. Eoin Fitzgerald.
That's me.
How you doing, pal?
How you doing? Sure, I'm not too bad. On this lovely Wednesday morning as I look out my window.
Yeah.
It's awful.
I've already been outside once, and I won't go outside again until probably about 6 o'clock.
Same. Did the school run. That'll be it now until I do the school run later.
Yep. I did my walk, and what I had, again, I'm listening a lot lately to the On the Brink podcast with Nick Carter and Matt Walsh from Castle Island Ventures, as well as Web3 Breakdowns with Eric Golden. Web3 Breakdowns is a spin-off of Invest Like the Best, right? So Patrick O'Shaughnessy started doing the Web3 Breakdowns.
Business breakdowns I'm familiar with. Yeah, I didn't know there was a Web3 breakdowns.
Okay. Really, really good stuff. And I got a primer on stablecoins this morning. And I always like the primer episodes, even though it's something that I may be familiar with already, because you just get all that reinforced and you get that deeper look into things, and making lots of comparisons between stablecoins and the e-money regime and Mika in EU. So I was just kind of drooling over that stuff, which was a lot of fun. That's how my own sick mind works.
I find I flick between a few, depending on a lot of it depends on the guest sometimes.
Yeah, it does.
You know, like the Prof G show, then I've got Invest Like the Best. But some of them I don't. If I don't know the guest enough, I'll be like, I'll probably skip that one. Or I'll go back to one of the ones that I really like and just listen to it again.
Yeah. And you start to see the circuit of different guests appearing on the same, theme of podcasts, and then the hosts of one
Especially
podcast.
when there's a book.
Yeah, exactly. And the hosts of one podcast appearing as guests on someone else's, and they kind of trade back and forth on that. So it's like this guy, Rob Hamilton, he's involved somehow with Ordinals, which is this NFT project on top of the Bitcoin network, which is funny. It was Matt Walsh from Castle Island Ventures was talking about it on the Brink podcast. And he's like, here's proof that Bitcoin isn't just some sleepy old project. And I'm like, for those in crypto to be able to say Bitcoin is just some sleepy old project, but you hear the rest of the world talking about that. They're like, Bitcoin sleepy? What do you mean? Looks like it's wide awake. I don't know what it's doing. It's all over the place. Anyway, that's my fun bit for the debate. Listen, in terms of talking about things that are all over the place, Jesus, the banking situation in the US right now is maniacal.
I hate when we record and like we put it out on a Friday and then some breaking news story which is really relevant comes out like the same day, and I'm like, for God's sake.
Yep.
We've just been talking about something else like 2 days beforehand, and it's a massive story.
I know. I talked to Simon Taylor about this specifically from FinTech Brain Food. He and I caught up a couple of weeks ago, and I said the same thing. He's like, Pete, you just got to let it go. He's like, you got to have a weekend. He's like, if you put stuff out and then you finish it and then the world changes, it's just you cover it next week, right? So here we are. And
I like that. Here we are, and probably there's enough ink has been spilled at this point on
I know
SVB in particular.
And when I mentioned this to you last night, I'm like, you're right. And so I didn't want to go through this in detail, but just for the folks that may not have been paying attention, that first we had Silvergate Bank go a couple of weeks ago, and then we saw, or it wasn't a couple of weeks ago, it was 10 days ago roughly, and then we had Silicon Valley Bank that went on Friday. When I say went, I mean it shut. There was a bank run that resulted in, okay, we got to close the doors here, and the FDIC in the US steps in and does just that. And then Signature Bank then also went over the weekend. And these bank runs are really unique in that depending upon the depositor, you have certain obligations. If it's an obligation to yourself as an individual, well, fine. But if it's an obligation that you have to investors, if you're a venture capital fund, or an obligation you have to shareholders, if you're a startup, and your employees and your partners, then you can get into all different types of conflicting situations with what to do during a bank run. And ideally, and I think I heard someone say this morning, and forget which podcast to quote, but humans still behave with this innate core behavior that existed 10,000 years ago. And you can't change. And that means look out for number one, right? So, there's been a bunch of ink spilled, like you said, about this over the past number of days. I am going to put in the show notes just 3 good summaries from people that we know, or at least 2 of the 3 we know and have had on the show. So Liang Wu did a good recap on the Life in Color blog, and he was on the show last week, the week before, and it's called When It Rains, It Pours. Also, Nick Milanovic, who we had on the show last year from This Week in FinTech, did another good one called Signals, SVB, Signature, and Silvergate. Gate, right? Like Watergate. And then Daniel Kuhn from CoinDesk, Should I Keep My Money in Bitcoin or a Bank? And that was the interesting note that I got from a couple people over the weekend. Like, is crypto going to come out of this looking all shiny? And where crypto operates on this, this model of your keys, your crypto, if you secure it yourself, it's yours and you hold it. If there's a hack of your exchange and you are holding crypto on an exchange, obviously that's a problem, but that's not you holding it in your own wallet. That's you holding, assets on an exchange. So, and this was when the person, one of the messages I got from somebody said, just that they were unaware that USDC had depegged. It's the stablecoin USDC. There was $3 billion in assets held at Silicon Valley Bank of the $40 billion in reserves behind the stablecoin, and that was over the weekend. It depegged, and then by Sunday night it was nearly back. So that was the only blip really for crypto out of all of this. Other than I think it's Elizabeth Warren in the U.S. who is championing the fall of these banks that are involved in crypto and saying, I told you so. I told you crypto was bad. It's like, oh, come on. Yeah. Get over yourself, So, it's a story that will continue to develop. People say never let a good crisis pass you by. I think there's going to be a lot of changes, perhaps, at the VC level that comes out of this.
Yeah. What I found interesting was, there's 2 things. First of all, I think it was great, obviously, in the UK that HSBC stepped in, or were asked to step in, pushed to step in, whatever. But look, that was good for the market. There's 3,500 or more clients there in the UK dealing with SVB. So, and look, they've, as well as you'd know a good few of the team kind of across Ireland, UK, the same way I would. So that was great for the business and for those kind of companies working with them. And ultimately, it'll work out very well for HSBC. I mean, they got it for £1 and 2 billion in liquidity or whatever. So, I think it'll work out very well. They're very strong companies. I used to come up against SVB all the time in Barclays. I used to look after the technology manufacturing telecoms clients, and SVB was in everything. Yeah. Because they knew how to lend to them, to a SaaS business. So that was their niche, and they did it really well. So the likes of HSBC will do very well out of that, I'd say, in the long term. The other piece, I think, was there was the immediate kind of high-profile contagion possibility in the US, especially, and you have VCs and the companies and other banks and stuff. But actually, to me, the bit that they weren't going to quantify was, the impact on people. And I think, SVB were lending against equity, against shareholding for startup founders and stuff. They were the only show in town for that. That's people's mortgages, that's people's loans, their living, their payroll, their salaries, everything. And I don't know if it was necessarily something I could quantify, but that would have been a massive kind of knock-on effect.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the one that was, rumored to be going next was First Republic Bank, but then that dropped 60% in their equity dropped 60% on Monday, and then it shot right back up, I think the following day, yesterday. So once it was clear that the Fed could perhaps be stepping in there as well. So hopefully, that's a bank run averted. You can't stop these bank runs. It's nuts.
No, it looked like on paper, or you saw a lot of the commentary, nobody wanted to bail out the rich billionaires and the VCs and all that, but actually it was the once the domino effect of the people on the ground in the startups. I saw tweets from a couple of startups where they might have closed a round recently and all that money was sitting in Silicon Valley Bank.
Yep.
Couldn't pay staff or anything like that. So, but again, because they were so good at what they did, they were the only one able to do it, which meant that it was such a massive concentration risk when VCs are getting funded by them and then they're getting their portfolio companies to work with them, and everything was just a circular route back to SVB.
Yeah, and that was the point of one of the points from On the Brink.
Yeah.
Was that particularly, and this is more due to the crypto side, but the concentration of activity at banks and crypto-friendly banks is that by the Fed saying to some of the bigger banks that, sorry, you can't bank crypto, that then pushes all of the crypto players to concentrate in banks, smaller banks, where they will be banked. And that is a risk. And the Fed has had to step in to bail out, particularly Signature Bank. So the policy needs to change there at the top as well. And I think it's just this.
Well, that's it. You're inadvertently creating the concentration risk.
You are.
Through your policy,
absolutely are. You are. So. And I think we just need, it's going to take, we talked last week about the Web3 gender gap and changing society one year at a time and, top down and bottom up. I think, changing the view towards whether it's society or individuals or politicians or businesses viewing that, listen, digital scarcity is a good thing. This is actually a technology that you cannot put back in the box. So let's come up with some policies around it. And I'll keep saying it, the EU were steps ahead with MiCA.
Well, and that's it. And MiCA will change things, and MiCA will allow banks to play in that space.
Exactly.
Because it'll be a bit clearer on the regulation. Yeah, it won't be fit for everybody, but the majority will be accepted then in some shape, or they'll know what's needed, and that'll open up the market a lot more then.
It will. I know. I could talk all day on this topic, but
that's probably all we need to say on that.
Yeah, like
I have a couple of links I'll send you for the show notes. Mark Rubenstein, Net Interest, is a newsletter I subscribe to. It's excellent. He writes really well on banking and financial services. He put together a really good piece on SVB and the downfall and everything. So we'll stick that in the show notes as well.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Like Forrest Gump says, that's all I have to say about that.
But speaking of podcasts earlier, and actually would have been a far better segue if we'd gone into that in the middle.
Yeah.
No, one of the ones I listen to regularly is Invest Like the Best with Patrick O'Shaughnessy. But like that one, I go back to a lot. He has 2 episodes with Sam Hinkie, who used to be the the assistant GM for the Houston Rockets.
Yep.
And then the GM for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I suppose is one of the pioneers of analytics in basketball. Daryl Morey was his boss at the Rockets, and he's like the main man. If there was a Mount Rushmore, as they call it, there'd be just those 2 guys on it.
Oh, yeah.
And he's out now doing his own. He has 87 Capital. It's his own investment fund. But he has 2 great episodes. And the last one, actually, the more recent one, we'll put both in my show notes. Patrick O'Shaughnessy was interviewing him, obviously, and he was asking him about, any kind of contrarian views he has in relation to venture, or things that he would have taken from his basketball learnings and applied to kind of venture. And one thing that struck me was he doesn't believe in this idea of making kind of a quick decision on somebody. Within the first 10 minutes you decide, I like this founder, I don't like this founder. It kind of struck me because obviously between me and you, we look at a lot of stuff over the course of a year or over the course of the last number of years. And like that, it's easy to jump to a kind of instant judgment, or no, I don't like this. Oh, I'm not sure I like this founder. But he's talking about not what he calls breadcrumbs, not only multiple kind of meetings, but looking at stuff people have put out online, or he even as far back with the companies he's investing in, he goes back and looks at what thesis they did in college and stuff like this. So his is probably to the extreme, but it got me thinking that we might have a chat, particularly about your learnings over the last, because you've gone through the 2 cohorts now in terms of applications.
Yep.
And obviously your work with Lego, so that's probably 1,000 or more at least. In the last
1,000
2
or more
years
at
alone.
least that I've looked at, deals that have gone through my eyes.
That's just on tech.
And I remember back a few years ago with other partners trying to get funds off the ground, and some of the investors, the fund investors that I was talking to were saying, listen, where are you going to get the deal flow from? And I'm like, oh, don't worry, I'll get it. Right. But the criticality of high volume deal flow is now baked into my mind, in that you need to put yourself in a position, you need to be out there and talking about what you're doing in order to get deal flow, in order to get people to say, yes, I would like you to invest in what I'm doing. And that volume that I've seen, that point about Sam Hinkie and building relationships and not investing after the first meeting, so critical. The line that I keep saying is investors invest in lines, not dots, right? And if you think of that line that goes up, you need that line to be an increased font or an increased weight. And you find ways to increase the depth and breadth of that line. And so these multiple interaction points that you have, I was saying to a founder yesterday, I said, listen, we're in a situation where we just spoke with you for the first time 2 weeks ago. Usually in this type of setting, we're talking to people 4, 6, 8 weeks ago. And we're having numerous interactions. We're getting to know each other. And what tends to happen is that you can like someone right away, or perhaps you don't. But if you really like their business, and there's a framework for this, then you're going to talk to them again, regardless of whether you like them or not, right? Because people don't always warm up to people right away. And also, you need to be a student of your own subconscious bias, right? And say, like we talked about last week, did I like them because they remind me of me? Or did I not like them because they don't remind me of me? Or did I not like them because they do remind me of me? And I see some of my own faults in them, right? So you got to give these things time to develop. But anyway, when I say invest in lines, not dots, having those multiple interaction points, what tends to happen is that you build up over time. And you either plateau and you get to the point where, okay, we're seeing eye to eye. We both want to do this. You want me to invest in you. I want to invest in you. Let's do this. Or you get to the point where it's going up and up and up and up. And you can have the similar exact track between two deals, one that you say yes on and one that you say no on. And one of them just crashes and burns because something happens. Because you're like, oh, I didn't know that. Or they figure out that maybe it's not right for them. And it falls to pieces. But if we had pulled the trigger, 3 weeks before that, just on the basis of the first couple positive interactions, that deal would have fallen apart. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, that's the first thing really, is just that these things need to be done with time. And if a startup founder ever gets frustrated because a VC is taking their time, then you kind of do want them to take their time.
Yeah. Because whilst fundamentally it's a transaction, like it is a long-term relationship, so it can't be transactional.
No,
even though it is a transaction that you're trying to do ultimately.
Yeah, it needs to be based on building that relationship, and you need to have a framework as well. And seeing the high volume of deal flows does train your brain to think about your framework right off the top of your head, and you need to have the ability to do that. The one that I follow is the one, and when you're investing pre-seed, it's all about team, right? And that it's the 4 things I look for are team, market, traction, and product or idea. What are each one of those, right? And when you're having a conversation with someone, generally those conversations start out, they're very, very product heavy. And you need to have the discipline in order, even if you love the product, you need to move into the team. Tell me about how it's constructed. Tell me about the market, your experience in that market. Tell me about how you're doing so far with getting people interested in what you're doing. And you need to have that type of balanced approach. And if you're just making decisions based upon hype of a technology or a product, and you're not going into depth on the team, you're not going to get anywhere with that.
Because I think you can make a quick decision on the opportunity because you might have looked at 10 in a similar market.
Yes.
And you're like, yes, this one gets it. This one has the opportunity. It's an easier decision to make quickly.
Yeah.
But still, obviously, it's the team and the founder piece takes longer.
Yeah. But, I've been at a stage where I'm trying to make a hard decision between 3 that are all doing kind of the same thing. And I'm making my decisions based upon the team, how much traction they have, and how well they know the market. So some of these tells, right, these signals that I look for when I'm talking to a team, Zoom is great for this, right? You could see eyes rolling when one founder is speaking and the other one doesn't like what they're saying. You can hear them talking over each other. Zoom is just so helpful with this because you're looking at both faces at the same time, or three faces at the same time, right? You're also looking for mentorability. Will this person listen to good advice? Will this person know what bad advice is? And are they flexible? Are they self-aware? Do they have that humility to know that they don't have everything and they're not always going to be right? And there are ways to, just the types of questions that you ask around that. And there are questions you might pose to somebody that you'll like this one, where if you have a doubt that the founding team has strong commercial ability to execute and to sell, you got to test for that. And I put one founder on the hot seat and said, sell me this Messi jersey, right? I had
sell me this pen.
Exactly. I had my son's Lionel Messi jersey, and the founder did a great job because he was asking me questions about, trying to build a relationship with me. He was trying to build a relationship with me and asking me, was I a fan of Messi? What football teams did I watch? Did I watch the World Cup? What did I think? Blah, 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 all this type of stuff before he moved in for the sell. And I'm like, okay, this founder has some good commercial sensibility around them. Another one I had some doubt on, and I said, all right, can we find your killer instinct here? Can we find your kind of overt outward sales chutzpah? And he's like, well, it's not very British, right? And I said, well, let's think of somebody who's a founder that you admire. And he said, Tom Blomfield from Monzo. And I'm like, yes. Tom has this understated technique of influencing people and getting them on board. But we know at least I know, or at least Ann Bowden represented it this way, that, Tom isn't exactly a quiet, shy, understated guy, right? Yep. He knows what he wants and he's going for it. It's just the way that he comes across is more in line with his own personality, right? So, there's different ways to look for this. And then also with the team itself, and especially when you've got, because we're making a purposeful attempt that we want to bring more female founders into this accelerator program. And that when you see how the male and female of a team interact, and, there was one, and I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't want to give it away, but there was one that was like last year, man, that was just... And when I say man, I mean man in the way that he talked to his fellow founder who was a female. Really? And it was like, we're not going there. We are not going there. So,
it's hard to test for some of those kind of traits early on. I find trying to figure out someone's kind of like that, their killer instinct mainly, or their ability to lead, because obviously they're trying to position things in a particular way, but trying to identify if the founder has either the skill set or, the perseverance to kind of make it work.
Yep. And I mean, that's where the market is so critically important as well. Does that founder have deep firsthand experience in that market? Do they know the market? Not only do they know the market, but do they know the channel they're going down? If they're going down a B2B channel, do they have B2B experience? If they're going down B2C, do they have B2C experience? If they're going B2B2C, man, that's really hard. So do they have experience with that? And these are all questions you can ask. You can look at people's LinkedIn profiles only to a certain extent. You've got to ask the question. You've got to bring in other people to help you vet them. You've got to even, I know one investor that just randomly will call people that, say, oh, hey, I saw on your LinkedIn profile, you might have worked with so-and-so in the past. Can you tell me about that? Yeah. And sometimes he gets some information. Sometimes he gets, a hang up, right?
I like that. You need more, as Sam Hinkie calls it, breadcrumbs or data points.
You do.
Because like that, your line is not up and to the right. It's not a straight line. It's lots of dots leading in a particular direction.
Yeah.
All pieces that, help you make that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely critical. And it's like that line that's going up and up, having other investors, mentors that I know well, talk to these founders just to get that different perspective is so critical. And you may catch someone on a good day, you may catch someone on a bad day, then they have another conversation and it can flip. Also, you need to be very aware when you're investing globally of the impact of getting people at a bad hour, right? You may have a terrible conversation with someone because it's 2 a.m. and that was the only time slot that you could do. And because they're thinking about, well, I really want to, I want to work with this investor. They may agree to do something at 2:30 in the morning. And, people are night owls sometimes, maybe they're not. And then or you get them for a first great conversation in the middle of the day. And then, in the middle of the night, things just fall to pieces. And give them a chance and talk to them again on their normal hours. But, you can always get people at a bad hour. And that's one thing you got to be very careful of when you're investing globally. And just be mindful and respectful of what time it is in other time zones, right? Always got to do that.
Tell me this. Sorry, I was going to say, how do you find, because I suppose we're both, I'm obviously I'm investing, but not as a VC. And then we're not the traditional investors.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Techstars does things a particular way. How do you find, or how have you found that based on, I suppose, both of us being students of the game, for want of a better description? We read and absorb a huge amount of stuff from the more traditional VC world, and then trying to fit that into our own kind of particular investing or our business's investing kind of philosophy.
Yeah. It's been interesting. And this is, Techstars, the Techstars way is team, market traction idea, right? And that is ingrained into my head. Now, to me, it's team market traction idea. And I can have a conversation around that. And the ability to do that, like I said, only comes from repetition. And so Thank you to Hugh McGurr, the investment principal on the Techstars Web3 program with me, who continually pounds this into my head. These 4 things we need to look for, we need to test for, right? So you need to have that framework. And I remember in the prepping for demo day last year, though, that it changes. So when you make your initial investment decision, when you're doing pre-seed, you can use those 4 criteria. But then when you're testing how well that they're presenting themselves for investment from others, you need to go back to your 10, right? And I'm not going to rattle all of them off because I'm not going to get them all. Let's see if I can. Okay. Vision, problem, solution, market that you're selling into, your go-to-market plan, your team, your traction, your competition, I just had it.
Roadmap.
Your roadmap.
I only say that because I have them here in front of me. You sent them to me before; they're on my screen.
And the ask, right?
Yeah.
And you need to have all 10 of those. So when I was doing last year the demo day preparation and having people pitch over and over and over again until they had it down cold, I was testing for all 10 of those things. Now, we don't do the ask in a Techstars pitch because that's investor solicitation, but that follows up afterwards. But so it comes down to 9. And that's when you shift gears a bit. So when you're going to bring somebody in, you're doing it based upon these 4 key criteria. But then when you're going to actually help socialize this deal to other investors, you need to hit a lot more criteria, right? Because they're going to be tested on a lot more at, a seed stage or, getting that first round done than it would have been when I'm investing pre-seed, right? And I was saying this to someone yesterday that I always feel like if you want to master your level, you need to master the level one step before you. And that's angel, right? Angel investing. And that's why I'm such a student of folks like Jason Calacanis, read his book, did his angel course online. And, I would like to even get further in depth there. Hugh McGurr said to me, well, Pete, think about that, but also think about Series A, right? What is it that we need to help founders master themselves based upon how Series A invests, right? And how, true seed stage investors invest as well. And
actually that's an interesting point because one of the things I was going to ask was, it flips, especially obviously with the Techstars model. You do this very intense period of work with these companies. Obviously you evaluate them in detail, then you work with them very closely, but then there must be a big shift in the nature of the relationship even on the other side.
There is. And that was when I was picking out my few lessons learned here. There is that point of that shift that, okay, you get your lines, not dots. And, like we talked about, so have your framework critical. And whatever that is, whatever that works for you, is something that needs to be baked into your mind, that you can do, that you can reach to and use over and over again in the course of a conversation cold. Have the multiple interaction points, lines, not dots, absolutely critical. Then you kind of get into the fold with somebody after you've made that investment decision. The thing about running an accelerator program is that you've got those 13 weeks after you've made the investment decision to really get them moving and get them moving faster, i.e. the term accelerator, right? But there is that shift. You're getting to know each other. You're trying to figure it out. You're always trying to be in a position of not saying, hey, tell me what you're doing today, or give me an update on the business over the last week. But what can I help you with today? How can I help unlock some value? How can I help make an introduction? What is the main thing that you're worried about today that I might be able to help you with today? Send me your email update, please, and I'll read that on how everything's going. But let's concentrate our focus on helping to get you moving in the right direction on what you're struggling with today, right? Which is sometimes the hardest thing to do, because you're always looking for more context, always looking for more information. But that shift from, all right, we've made the decision, the money's in the bank, we're moving forward with this. We need to get you and then bridge you logically and learning wise to getting that first round going. And it's a whole different mentality, and shifting into how people, like we talked about last week, how people think about raising money from VCs. Yep. And this investor pipeline methodology that I teach, and with, again, a shout out to Jenny Fielding, whose method it is that I've just fallen in love with, the method, not Jenny. Well, Jenny is a rock star, I'll give her that. But it's a process that you go through, and you need to do deep research. The biggest thing is, if you're getting tons of no's from investors, sometimes that's right. It's, that you should be getting a no. Other times it's that you've researched the wrong investors. You are not attacking the right list. You're not hammering that right list to make sure you can get intros to all those people. And I'm going to help with those intros, and Techstars is going to help with those intros. But you need to do the work to identify who are the right investors for you. You always need to be in the mindset that investing in my business should be a freaking pleasure for investors. This is the best deal they're ever going to have. Now, you don't say that, and you don't carry yourself that way, because that's incredibly arrogant and you're going to upset a lot of people. But you need to be looking at the investor landscape as if you're a crazy salesperson targeting customers. Who are the customers you really, really want to have that are going to be strategic for you? They're going to help you to get other customers. Who are going to be the investors you're going to build a great, strong relationship with, that's going to help you get other investors and help you with a whole bunch of different things in your business. That's a mindset you need to have. So when you start thinking about building your investor pipeline, it needs to be done on the basis of, who are the ones that I think I'm really going to build a great relationship with, that I'm really going to like, they're going to like me, we perhaps have something in common. You got to do a ton of research around that. And that's no small piece of work. And you just got to start attacking that. And that is the shift. And that is the shift from, we've made an investment, to how do we actually get others to invest in this business as well? And it's a two-way street, because you can teach someone, you really want to be able to teach someone to fish. And that you're not going to hand anything to anybody on a silver platter other than a warm intro, right? If the person that's the founder that's asking for an introduction has proven to me that, this is an investor that they really want, and here's why. Because then I can go to that investor with tons more conviction, and because I'm not going to introduce a deal to a VC that I know that VC is not interested in that kind of deal, whether it's a stage, no matter how well I know Mike Brennan from Finch Capital. I'm not going to introduce pre-seed stage deals to him, because he does not invest pre-seed. And now, no matter how much of a nice guy Mike is and how much I like him, and that he and I have known each other for years, I'm just not going to do that, because it's a waste of his time, and it's a waste of my time. And it's a waste of the founder's time doing the research and getting excited about the fact that I know Mike. Right. So, it's that is such a big, massive part of it. I think going along with that you definitely have to be supportive. And that's part of why I love doing this, is that I love working with founders, full stop. Right. I love working with early stage founders. and I love the upside as well, right? Which is critically important. So I'm incentivized to be supportive, and I'm a naturally helpful person, so that is good as well. But you got to let them stumble. You got to let them make their mistakes, because it's the only way that people learn is through making the mistakes themselves. If, and you can't go on every pitch with them. Probably shouldn't go as an investor, as an early stage investor. You can't, because the founder's voice is the most credible voice in the room. You need to let them do it.
And in terms of even your own mindset, I know I find it challenging at times when you're working with companies at different stages, and in terms of even adapting your own role and your own kind of mindset too, because obviously you're knee deep and probably close to announcing your latest cohort and getting that kicked off at the same time working with last year's cohort who have made different progress at different stages. Mm-hmm. So you're managing two portfolios of companies effectively in different stages.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you've got, and I'm saying to all of them, the first 9, I said, your logos are up on my wall. I'm looking at your logos all day, every day. There's going to be another 12 that are going to be joining that wall, okay, in the next few weeks. Get your requests in now, because while it's still fresh, that because a lot of companies that came out of the crypto struggle last year that were initially going to raise via a token sale, that market disappeared and dried up. So they had to pivot their strategy, not pivot their business completely, but pivot their strategy. And so now a lot of them have just come back to the fundraising campaign now, because the market's starting to come back a little bit, or, this banking problem is hopefully just a speed bump. Now, it's important to point out that when we went down the path of sourcing founders last year for the program, that the crypto markets were a much different shape than they are now. What we've been able to identify is founders that are like, well, listen, we're still in this no matter what's happening with crypto. We're still here building, because there's so much to be done in Web3. And so, we're getting founders at a little bit of a later stage now, just because of how fast the market was moving last year. Things have slowed down a bit. People are thinking longer and harder about actually doing this. So, but it's definitely a different situation. And now I'm going, we'll be up at 21 portfolio companies, and, have 5 from before Techstars. So, getting up to the stage of looking after 26 companies.
Yeah. Listen, I have a whole list of things that I had written down. I was like, oh, we must chat about that, and I must ask that.
Go for it.
Even though I was going to say that, like, there's so much we should really bring it on to a second call.
Yeah, and what would be good is to do this with another investor.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned a few, and I know we've a couple lined up. Someone probably coming in a more traditional VC role, but maybe not with a traditional background, because lots of people from lots of different backgrounds end up investing. It's always interesting to see what they take from their previous life into it.
Yeah. And just to bring it back, it's deal flow. It's all deal flow.
Yeah.
I remember sitting down with a VC in 2019, and with one of the last VC projects I tried to get off the ground. And that investor said to me, Pete, you're not going to get the deal flow. With this strategy, you will not get that deal flow for the geography you're looking to do. I said,
yeah.
And it's so true. And getting deal flow is not just about market dynamics and where people are and where they're starting up, but it's about your presence in the market. You can't just sit back on your laurels and wait for people to come to you. You got to go out and find people. You got to go out and get them. And it's not a tap that you can just turn on. You need to do a lot of work in order to get yourself in a position where if you go out and you start speaking to the world, that people listen. Yep. And you get that audience, and people are like, okay, well, yeah, having a podcast helps, right? So, yeah. But yeah, no, I always love to talk to other investors about this, because you just can learn so much from a simple conversation.
That's it.
You can learn so much. And like we said last week, that one chat or that blog post from Finn Murphy from, a few years ago, that just crystallized that for me, of every investment you make needs to be done on the basis that it will be a home run, that you will get 100x as an investor. You'll get 100 times your investment back, because you might, out of every 30 investments you make, you might get 2, if you're lucky. 1 that would be that home run that would return your fund.
So we'll have to watch this space to see which one of your 26 is the home run.
Absolutely. Hopefully all of them.
The odds are starting to be in your favor the more you do.
Well, that's the thing with 1 out of what is it? 95% of startups fail. And, by putting them through a program the first 13 weeks and building that relationship and building that trust, you can hopefully get things to a position where you're lowering those odds. You're lowering those odds of failure. Yeah. You're increasing the odds of success. And that's just what I try to do.
All you can do.
Yep.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, let's see who we can get on to have a further chat about this.
Yeah, sounds good.
And you enjoy those emails coming in, and we'll talk to you next week.
I will, yeah. Take it easy.
Adios. That does it for this week, folks. You can learn more about the stories we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as it helps others to find the show. Thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early stage startup investor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch with us, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.